Howdy, y'all. Joe Hills here, recording as I always do in Nashville, Tennessee, and I'd like to welcome you to my new series, Joe Hills Says You Can Code. This series welcomes folks with little or no programming experience to the power of creating and publishing your own work on the internet. Future lessons will focus on publishing your first web page, expanding your work into an entire website, and ways to manage sprawling amounts of blog posts and things like that through WordPress. But first, I'm going to teach you how to make a bad web page. A bad web page is a starting point, like an illustrator's pencil sketch or a sculptor's rough concepts. We will make something to prove we can make it, examine it in light of what we have learned, and then ultimately recreate, refine, and replace it with something better. You might ask, what does Joe know about this stuff anyway? Well, let me tell you, I have been marking up web pages in HTML and styling them with CSS for fun since I was in middle school back in 1999. We really knew how to party back then. I started building websites professionally as a LAMP developer. Now that is Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. I started doing that back in December 2006. You can check my LinkedIn for more specifics. Let's go and move on to the simplest possible bad web page. What is the simplest possible bad web page? Let me tell you. It is a text file with an HTML extension that you double click to open in a web browser. It works just like you had loaded off a web server, but it's all on your own computer. So let's do that. Let's open up your text editor. If you're on Windows, for example, you'd be using Notepad. Now, rabbit hole warning here as I open Notepad. Rabbit hole warning. Everything that we're going to be talking about today, developers care deeply about. And that includes browser choice, that includes text editor choice. It's everything. We are using the simplest, easiest defaults here just to get going and hit the ground running. You can do all the research you want on your own about any topic we cover today, and you'll be like, wow, Joe could have done an 80-hour tutorial evaluating all of these options. We're not here to do that today. We're here to help you get your first website made. So, now that you've got your editor open, let's go ahead and delete that rabbit hole warning. And we are going to write something in that text editor. Now, the traditional programming course example would say that you need to type "Hello World!" ! Or if they're particularly somber, "Hello World!" If they're particularly ponderous, maybe "Hello World!" Something like that. But you know what? I'm not here to tell you what kind of website to make. I want you to share the message that's in your own heart. Now, for me, when I ask, how would Joe Hills say hello world? I say, howdy y'all ball. Joe Hills here. Writing not quite valid HTML yet from Nashville, Tennessee. Then we need to save that file with an HTML extension. Call it badwebpage.html and save it somewhere that you can find it. Step 4, find it. If you cannot find the file, go back to step 3, find a folder you know how to find, and put badwebpage.html in that folder. Step 5. Open that file in your web browser. Here's mine now. We are going to refresh that because I already had it open. There it is. Howdy, y'all ball. Joe Hills here, writing not quite valid HTML yet from Nashville, Tennessee. Hey, that's fantastic. Congratulations. If you made it this far, you made a bad web page. You could take that file right now and upload it to a web server, which is a fancy word for someone else's computer somewhere else. And then people who access that file on that server from their phones or their own web browsers on their desktops, they would see exactly what you're looking at. So I hope you're proud of what you wrote, because we're going to get to hosting and getting all that stuff out there in the rest of the world in lesson 2. For today, though, we're going to keep everything on the computer and just try to hit the ground running with making things happen in our HTML file. Now, you might say, HTML file? Is this an HTML file yet? No, not really. Not especially. So let's try this once more with HTML. And apparently hitting the microphone, but I'm not cutting that out. Before we start adding HTML tags, we need to add an instruction at the top of the file so that the web browser knows to certainly interpret this document as HTML. So, this is a doc type. You can sing that like in Portal if you want. This is a doc type. I hope you put exclamation point after the less than sign before D. HTML. And then greater than, we'll call that a closing bracket. Okay, yeah, I didn't write a whole parody there, but that's fine because we only get so many beats before we have to deal with, copyright strikes. Because I was exactly on pitch that entire time, you guys. So, core concept, we can save this file, and if we reload it, it will look in no way different over here. That's okay. It's more valid. But just because something is valid doesn't mean it's where we want it to be. Or just because it's slightly more valid. There's still some errors if we try to validate it. We'll get to those later. Core concept. We can at least now start using real HTML tags. Now, if you used Markdown or other markup languages when you've used like web forums or things like that, little tags like a little B and like a bracket type thing, it's kind of similar to that. We are going to be adding headings, paragraph, and list tags here so that you can get your head wrapped around the way that tags wrap around individual HTML elements. Or you could call those HTML elements if you want to. Although people will be like, where did the last L go? That was language. And you could be like, language is meaningless when you just mash words together. We could do this all day. Honestly, we could. But we have a tutorial to get to. So let's go ahead and try something else. How about we put a new line after our doctype HTML here and say greetings. Now, this seems like a pretty good header for our greeting, although it's plural. Maybe we want greeting. There we go. Now that's more accurate. People love accuracy in their websites. That's why AI is struggling so much. But anyway, if we refresh this now, we see, ooh, HTML cares nothing for your line breaks. We could add 2 line breaks here. Refresh that again over there. Nothing. Nope. That is because new lines are not how HTML lays out documents. HTML lays out documents with tags, like this header tag indicates that that greeting goes above this paragraph, which we're going to indicate with a P tag. You can remember that because paragraphs always start with P. So then we save and refresh. Ta-da! All of a sudden, we have a space between our heading and our paragraph, and you'll see the browser automatically applied some default styles to separate the visual look and feel of the heading from the paragraph. We'll learn how to refine those styles and personalize them for your taste later, but we're not quite there yet. Okay, so moving on, now that we've got one heading, maybe we want to add another. Now, HTML lets you do all sizes of headings, 1 through 6. So, it lets you do 6 sizes of headings, 1 through all. But let's say that we wanted to add another heading here with some sites I recommend. Because a lot of the internet is about curation, and a lot of the services that currently provide curation have gone full bonkers algorithm, and they're not doing a great job. So maybe people recommending things again will be helpful. Dare to dream. So we have a new heading down here, and then let's say we want to make a list. HTML has a few ways to approach lists. We're going to start with one of the simplest ones. That's the unordered list. So opening UL tag and a closing UL tag creates a list. And if we save that and refresh it over here, it's going to be empty. We need to put in some list items. You know, when I think about sites that I want to recommend to folks, you know, I think of charities, for example, like Gamers Outreach. So if I type in gamersoutreach.org here, hey, that's something. That's a list item. I could also say, you know, I like when people learn stuff. Wikipedia.org, that's a pretty good one. Close that list item. Every one of these tags has both an opening and a closing tag around an HTML element. And then, yeah, lovetropics.org. They do great work for the environment while playing Minecraft. I tend to like charities that invite people to play Minecraft with them while raising money. Who knows why. Anyway, if we go ahead and refresh our page now, you'll see all three of those are now listed. Wow, this wasn't very hard, was it? We've gone from not knowing how to make a web page at all to having a web page with headings, a list, and a paragraph. Now, HTML, markup language, we're doing some markup and languaging here, but what about the HT? What is that? Is that high temperature? No, it's hypertext. That genius Tim Berners-Lee thought, like, boy, it'd be nice if we had a way to link documents by clicking on things, where you could see a word and then click on that word, through the magic of hypertext, be transported to information about whatever that concept that word expresses or represents is. It's all very philosophical, but it works. And you guys have probably seen links before. Now that the internet's a little bit more popular than it was when I started, most people are generally familiar with links. And those are created using the anchor tag. So we can't just put an open anchor tag and a close anchor tag around that, because it won't point anywhere. We need to add an href attribute, which will let us put in the precise URL we want to point to, gamersoutreach.org, right there. And then we don't actually need a proper URL in this other part. We can just call it Gamers Outreach. And we'll do the same for Wikipedia and Love Tropics here. Ta-da! Now that we have added those anchor tags with the hrefs, we have a much prettier list with the titles of the web pages. Gamers Outreach, Wikipedia, Love Tropics. That's looking much better. Now, the question is, will it validate? So having loaded up the HTML validator here, we can copy and paste our code across from Notepad and check it out. We got a warning here saying we need to add a language attribute to the HTML start tag. We don't actually have an HTML start tag, so we probably want to do that. And also, the element head is missing a required instance of child element title. Ooh, well, that explains why the tab at the top of my browser just says badwebpage.html and not, you know, Joe's bad web page. So why don't we go ahead and see if we can make a few changes to make all this work. First, we need to add opening and closing HTML tags with that language attribute. Now, I'm using English, so I'm going to say HTML lang equals ing up there, and we're going to slash HTML down here. Great. That is half the battle. Now, the other half is getting that head in. Ooh, what is a head tag even good for? Well, the head is distinct from the body, which we're also going to add a body and a slash body here. The body of your HTML file is the stuff that the people that visit are going to see. And the head is information about that stuff. So the title is not part of your web page itself. It's something about your web page. So that goes up here in the head tag. So we type title, Joe Made a bad web page. Yeah. /title. Done. Next problem. If we copy this over into that validator now, what do we get? Document checking completed. No errors or warnings to show. Hey, you'll love to see it. So now we have a site that basically looks the same to us, but is much more readable by browsers behind the scenes. But we're not making this stuff for computers. We're making this for people. And people like design. They like a little splash of color. So why don't we try this once more with color? You know how we said that head block up there, that was to describe stuff that was in the body? Well, you know what? One of the things that we describe up in the head is where to find styling information about your body. As we get further into this, in the next lesson, we're going to learn how to store your style information in a separate CSS file. But for right now, today, we are just going to open up a style tag and a close style tag. And then we are going to put in information about our heading tag, about our paragraph tag, and about our lists item tag. That's a very fun way to plural that. But anyway, or pluralize it. Now, we are no longer working with HTML. Those style tags are HTML, but what lies inside those style tags, that is the realm of CSS, which has an entirely different syntax. There's plenty to learn here, believe me, but we're just going to focus on the fundamentals today. So, if we type the name of one of our HTML tags that we want to describe or style, like H1, then we put little curly braces here, we can put in CSS declarations about that tag. In CSS, we call that H1 there the selector. We're selecting H1s down here, and then we will apply any declarations we have up here to them. So, color. Now, you can use a few different types of colors. We're going to use RGB hex. Now, R is pretty red. So let's say we're going to make this pretty red here. So we're going to put in, I don't know, CC0000. So that's pretty red, not very green, and not very blue. Then, for our paragraph selector, we're going to type in color. Let's just kind of go down the hex slide here and put the C's in the middle on the green, and then zeros out for the blue. Put a little semicolon after that to close that, and then curly brace. And then for our list item, we're going to type color here. Let's do 4 zeros. Yep. And then make that a little bit blue. Alrighty. So, we should be able to check if this validates. We're going to show our validator here, copying and pasting that in. And in theory, we should have no errors. Woo! And then when we roll this over here, we have colors now. Ta-da! Now, you might think, Joe, did you make the links bluer? I didn't. The links are the same amount of blue they were before. Fun fact, if we go like with a Kelly green here, 30C, 30C, changing that list item only changed the little dots. The actual anchor links need to override the browser's default here. So if we wanted to make those green too, we also need to say like 30C, 30C. And ta-da! Now that matches. We're ready for Christmas. It's a little early, but you know what? That's fine. We are making great progress. We now have a self-contained web page. You could take this file right now, put it on the internet. People could see it. Now, you might want to update your copy some and improve it a little bit, but don't worry about that. We are going to have plenty of time between now and Lesson 2. That's coming about a week from now, and Lesson 2 will be about hosting. Now, I should probably mention that this series is sponsored by a hosting company, NameHero, and you can visit my affiliate link at namehero.com/Joe. Woo! They have all sorts of great options for getting started with hosting. I think the Turbo Cloud hosting is probably going to be the tier that I would recommend to most viewers of this series who are trying to follow along at home, because that's also going to enable you to register your first domain name as part of that package. If you already have a domain name, you might be able to go with one of the lower tier packages. It's up to you. But we'll go more into making decisions about hosting and getting it all set up in Lesson 2. So I will see you back here for that. But this is just the beginning of your web publishing journey. There is more to learn about HTML and CSS and a ton of resources out there with the Mozilla Developers Networks and others. You will find links to resources in the description of this video and in the linked written version of this tutorial. That's also in the description of this video. I hope that y'all are excited about this. I am so glad to finally make this series happen after years of kicking it around in my head. Thank y'all so much for this opportunity, and thanks again to our sponsor, NameHero. Until next time, y'all, this is Joe Hills from Nashville, Tennessee. Keep adventuring.